Israeli elections today, Super Tuesday tomorrow, and the U.S. presidential election will be here before you know it. We will discuss the prophetic implications of these three events on today's edition of End of the Age. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dave Robbins with Endtime Ministries. Thank you for joining me on this edition of End of the Age. Now, a lot of you have been asking, where's Irvin Baxter at? Well, I can tell you he's going to be on the radio tomorrow. He wanted to do go over the elections, a lot of different things that are going on. Of course, and that's good news. I mean, he's the one who started this ministry, and everybody wants to hear what Irvin Baxter has to say. And so that's a good thing. And he'll be on here tomorrow. And what we're thinking about doing is he is working on a huge Revelation commentary project, writing a book and doing all the different DVDs and everything. But we're going to try to have him on one day a week until he can get that project done. And then we'll go from there. He was supposed to be on with me today, but he told me, he said, man, I'm writing like crazy. Everything's flowing. So let me just keep on writing, and then I'll be on the radio tomorrow. I said, that's fine. I'll let everybody know you're going to be on. So Irvin Baxter will be on the radio program with you tomorrow, and then I'll be back on with you Wednesday. And so thank you for being patient with me as I do all these radio programs. And you guys are always so kind and nice, and so thank you so much for that. But we're going to go over the Israeli elections today. The polls just closed previous to me coming on the air today. And if you've been watching the news at all, you'll know that it appears from the exit polls that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu may have succeeded in at least winning, these are exit polls now, winning 60 seats for his bloc. And so what does that mean? Well, of course, these are just exit polls. And we've got to make sure that everything gets counted and things like that. It'd probably happen later this evening. But it does appear that Netanyahu pulled it off. And so Irvin Baxter, they just closed just prior to me coming on the air. I didn't have time to pull it all together. And so I'm going to be talking to you kind of in hindsight today. Irvin Baxter will be talking to you, giving you the full details of everything that happened once all the final numbers come in. Again, these are exit polls. It does appear that he pulled it off, but we want to make sure that you know that these are exit polls at this point. The reason we're saying that it appears he pulled it off is because he was far enough ahead of Benny Gantz that it would be hard for him, even with the exit poll numbers, to close that gap. And so Netanyahu has already come out and said, hey, thank you, everybody, for electing me. Of course, we've been through this twice within the last year, and Netanyahu has to form a government. All this stuff has to happen. It's never as easy as the United States. I mean, the person gets elected, and we know that night or early that next morning, if you stay up with the presidential election here in the United States, who the person is. But after they get elected in Israel, then they got to form a government and all this other stuff. And so it can get kind of crazy before it gets back to normal. So we'll have to see. Netanyahu has said that he's going to try to form a government prior to his court case that's coming up here on the 17th because he's been indicted for bribery and some acts of some not so nice things. Let's just put it like that, corruption and other things. And so he's going to be going through a court case whether he got elected prime minister or not. So we'll have to see how it all plays out, if he can form a government before that. But with that said, let's talk about the Israeli elections. And I want to let you know probably why they may have went with Prime Minister Netanyahu and not Gantz. So in a special interview with Israel Hebron recently, Prime Minister Netanyahu stated this. They asked him a question. They said, under Trump's Middle East peace plan, what is required to apply Israeli sovereignty over Judea and Samaria? And Netanyahu said, well, completing the mapping process and me being elected. Now, this is one of the big things that I wanted to talk to you about, because Netanyahu is willing to move straight forward with just him and Donald Trump, like they did with recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital, the Golan Heights, moving the embassy to Jerusalem. They moved straight forward. Netanyahu, Donald Trump, with no regards for the international community. Whereas Benny Gantz, a little bit different situation. I'll get to that in a minute. So the Israel Hayam said, well, is the U.S. on board with that, moving forward after the mapping process and you getting elected? Netanyahu said, yes, we're in complete agreement on this, of course. They want to complete the entire mapping process and then apply sovereignty at once. He's talking about the Trump administration. And then they will immediately recognize our sovereignty. The mapping process is expected to take a month or two of considerable effort. Now, I've explained this a couple times, but I want to make sure you understand. In Donald Trump's peace plan, he laid out some maps that were kind of vague. Well, now they're going through and mapping everything in great detail, laying it all out. And Netanyahu has said, hey, you elect me, as soon as this mapping process is done, the United States and us, we're going to move forward on recognizing our sovereignty over these areas pretty quickly. And so we'll have to see what happens now that Netanyahu appears to be in.
About our trip, it was a wonderful experience. We totally enjoyed the time spent with other believers, worshiping and experiencing the places where Christ walked. One of our favorites was being on Mount Moriah, where the Holy of Holies are, the Dome of the Spirit. And the teachings that Brother Baxter did was so enlightening. It was so much to take in. It will take us another month or two to really grasp the full extent of the knowledge we received on this trip. Our tour guide in Israel was fantastic. He was very knowledgeable. I think God chose him just for us. Thanks, Jana. Our lives will never be the same. We will try to do this tour again. Mike and Julie L., Cayman Islands.
Join us May 1st through May 16th, 2020, for a trip to the wonderful land of Israel and the Holy Roman Empire reborn.
We've seen Bible prophecy fulfilled like never before. From the halls of the United Nations to the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, Endtime Ministries continues to reveal the Bible prophecy in the news headlines around the world every day. Whether it's through our broadcast or online at our Jerusalem Prophecy College, your gifts enable us to put vital materials in the hands of those who need it most. Because of you, we continue to replace fear with faith in the hearts of Christians around the world. We will continue to see prophecy come to pass at an even swifter pace. We need your support. Your donation of any amount enables us to continue to broadcast and be a voice in the ever-growing censored media. To become a partner or give a one-time gift, visit endtime.com or call 1-800-END-TIME right now. That's 800-363-8463. Go online now. Visit endtime.com.
So, you understand, in the current situation, Netanyahu has said, hey, as soon as the mapping process is over, we're going to move straight forward with the United States recognizing our sovereignty over the areas laid out in the Trump peace plan. But on the other hand, Gantz, Benny Gantz of the Blue and White Party, he said, and I'm quoting, he said, I will advance the plan immediately after elections in full coordination with the governments of the United States, Jordan, Egypt, and others in the region, and the Palestinians, and in coordination with the international community. Now, this is very key. In the Jewish Telegraph Agency, he said, after nearly 2 complete election campaigns, it's hard to discern where exactly that Benny Gantz stands on most issues. But from what we've seen, he is a centrist. Blue and White's platform, which was Benny Gantz, It emphasizes global collaboration on security issues and true Israeli democracy that recognizes Arab Israelis and equal citizens and requires religious Jews to serve in the army. The Likud, Netanyahu's party, was against that. And so these were diametrically opposed to each other in a lot of different areas. And it appears that these are the types of things that got Netanyahu the win. Now, you remember the difference here. You remember how Donald Trump, his administration, recognized, like I said, Jerusalem as Israel's capital. He moved the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, and he recognized Israel's sovereignty over the Golan Heights, all without any regards to the international community. If they would have went with Benny Gantz's plan, his platform, none of these things would have ever happened because the international community would never have recognized that. They would never have got on board with it. So you see the difference. Everybody, Trump rolling out his peace plan, that happened prior to or since the last election. So some of these things, Netanyahu said, hey, we're going to go ahead and move on this. The United States is on board. Let's get going. And Gantz couldn't do any of that. Plus, he was saying, I'm doing all this stuff in coordination with the international community. And Israel looked at Netanyahu in the United States and said, hey, these guys are willing to move. They're not as into the international community as some, especially with the Likud party and Netanyahu. So you can see the different dynamic here. You say, well, what was the real difference between the first and second one and the third one? Well, this was the biggest difference to me is when Donald Trump rolled out his peace initiative on January 28th, Netanyahu jumped on board and said, here we go. We're going to do the mapping process. We're going to get this thing done. And it appears there was probably some more things, but this is one of the biggest things right now is that Netanyahu, of course, he said he's going to build in the E1 area and a lot of different things, but this is probably the biggest thing. They see this as a huge opportunity right now to take this, the opportunity of the century for the United States to recognize sovereignty in a lot of these areas where they haven't been able to prior to this. So they went with Netanyahu. They were saying, here's what we want. So you know of the prophecy. I'm going to tie all these in together as we go down through here. The prophecy of the coming peace agreement. Daniel 9:27. And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. In the midst of the week, he shall cause the sacrifice, the oblation to cease. For the overspreading of abominations, he shall make it desolate, even until the consummation, and that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. So let me briefly explain the prophecy, and then we'll get to the United States election. Because, like I said, Irvin Baxter is going to go through this. He wanted to go through this in great detail with you tomorrow, especially once all the final results. You understand that the results from now, Israel's election, those are exit poll results. We want to see all the final results and everything to make sure, just to see. There's no way Gantz will catch him, but Irvin Baxter wanted to review everything and then go through with you tomorrow. So should be a great program. And tomorrow's Super Tuesday, but I'll get to that in a second. So the prophecy, the he in verse 27 is the Antichrist. The covenant that he will confirm is God's covenant with Abraham described in Genesis 15:18. In the same day the Lord made a covenant with Abraham, saying, unto thy seed have I given this land from the river of Egypt unto the great river, the river Euphrates. So the covenant is God's promise that the land of Israel will belong to the descendants of Abraham forever. The confirmation of that covenant will be when the Antichrist confirms that Israel has a right to live as a nation in the land that God promised to Abraham. So this passage says that this confirming of the covenant will last for a week of years or a 7-year period. So really quick, just to make sure you have these, we talked about them many times and we're going to tell you many more times. This prophesied peace agreement will contain 5 elements. The areas of Judea, Samaria, also known as the West Bank, will be given to the Palestinians as their homeland. You can see that in the peace agreement Donald Trump laid out. The Jews living in the Palestinian homeland will be allowed to remain living as a Jewish minority in that Palestinian homeland. That's laid out in Donald Trump's peace plan, the settlers that are out there right now. Number 3, the Temple Mount will be placed under a sharing arrangement so that both Muslims and Jews will be allowed to worship there. That's allowed for in Donald Trump's peace agreement. Number 4, the Jews will be allowed to build their third temple on the Temple Mount without disturbing the Dome of the Rock or the Al-Aqsa Mosque. There is a mention of that. In other words, the sharing of the Temple Mount, everybody being allowed to pray there, like they're, recognizing their different religions. That could allow for Israel to rebuild her third temple, but the third temple is not specifically mentioned in Trump's peace plan. And then number 5, the issue of control over Jerusalem will remain unsolved. So, and that obviously, Jerusalem is given control of, Israel's given control of all of Jerusalem in Trump's peace plan. So that's never going to be solved, even all the way to the end. That's what the Battle of Armageddon is going to be fought over. So in light of Bible prophecy, the most important thing that we will be watching going forward is how the next Israeli Prime Minister, Netanyahu, it appears to be, will implement the Trump peace deal, or anyone's deal for that matter. You say, well, what do you mean by that? Well, we've seen these things happen before. Well, something gets right to where you think it's going to, what's going to happen, and then everything falls apart, it goes away, and then something else comes along. So it appears that Donald Trump's peace plan could be the one. But again, something could happen, it go away tomorrow. Let's say Trump doesn't get elected or whatever. We don't know what's going to happen. It appears that it would be the one. It appears they're going to move forward with it. But until these things are rock solid and, you kind of live through them, you really don't know at this point. Again, it's speculation. But Netanyahu, Netanyahu appears to have won the election, and they're going to move straight forward with it. So it does appear on the surface that Trump's peace deal will be the one. How all the Palestinians and the international community get on board with it, how all that is solved, we don't know at this point. But it's very important that they did elect Netanyahu, who is not wanting to deal with the international community and say, hey, us and the Trump administration, we're going to move forward like we did everything else that they've done over the last couple of years. So in this Israel Hayam article, Netanyahu was asked another question. And again, I'm going from the prophetic significance of all of this. At the end of the day, I really don't care about Israel's, politics and, all this, how they get the train station through and all that. I don't really care about all that. I'm looking at it from a prophetic viewpoint. So again, in this article, Netanyahu was asked, it's an interview by Israel Hayam. They ask him, what about another thing, this mutual defense pact that you and the Trump administration has been talking about, a mutual defense pact between the United States and Israel. And the question was, what are the practical implications of such a defense treaty? Netanyahu said, it does not restrict our operational freedom. They've already talked about it. He said, but in the event of an existential threat to the state of Israel, i.e., let's say Iran bombing them with a nuclear weapon, or they think they're going to, the U.S. will stand by our side, period. And so they said the next question was, is Israel facing an existential threat? Netanyahu said, well, let's just say that if Iran were to obtain nuclear weapons, it would be a clear and present existential threat. That's why Netanyahu said that he would spare no effort, sometimes standing up to the entire world alone, to prevent Iran from having nuclear weapons. But he said this is not empty rhetoric. It's backed up by the actions we have taken, be it in a little diplomatic areas, this arena with regards to sanctions or with special ops. He said such as the Mossad's operation to extract that secret nuclear archive from the heart of Tehran. You remember when they went in and got all these secret files from Iran and snuck them out, and Iran didn't even know about it till Netanyahu revealed it on across the world. And then Netanyahu said, I took those documents to President Trump. Now, this is very important. This is what I want you to hear. Netanyahu said, I took those documents that we stole from Iran and that the Mossad did, and that I took those documents to President Trump, and after learning about them, he said, Donald Trump said this, and I'm quoting, he said, that's it, we're out. We're pulling out of the JCPOA, the nuclear deal. Once Donald Trump saw those nuclear documents, he made a decision, we're out. And of course, the international community just howls at the moon because they wanted to tie him in with this. The Obama administration signed us onto that. Donald Trump said, no way. These guys are they're planning on having a nuclear weapon anyway. And because of the sunset clauses in the JCPOA, the nuclear deal, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, he said it was going to allow them to get a nuclear bomb anyway. And so it's very important that we understand what Donald Trump did. He just said, we're out. Now, some of the other, all of the other Democratic presidential candidates, they would put us back into that. Now, I want you to think about that because we're going to be talking about the primaries on Super Tuesday tomorrow and coming up in a presidential election here in November. You want the United States to go back into that nuclear deal, which eventually gives them a nuclear weapon? Hey, that helps you make your decision, right? But Netanyahu said creating a defense pact with the United States, he explained, he said it's going to anchor the special relationship between Israel and the United States. Now, this is going to get prophetic here in just a moment. He said every country needs alliances. Superpowers need alliances, let alone a country like Israel. Well, now we move into prophecy because what he's talking about here is very prophetic. The prophecies of the Bible describe in detail what the world will look like in the end time. Revelation 13, 1 through 2, it describes a beast that symbolizes the world government of the Antichrist during the final 3.5 years. The beast has the body of the leopard, Germany, the feet of the bear, Russia. These are nations that will be involved in that world government. The mouth of the lion, Great Britain. You say, well, I thought Russia and the United States are kind of getting along right now. Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. In the end, we will be enemies big time because the United States is going to stand on behalf of Israel against the world government. And the mouth of the lion, Great Britain. You say, well, Boris Johnson and Donald Trump, they get along right now. Not in the end time world government. The Great Britain's going to be involved in that, not the United States. So it's cool to watch how prophecies are coming to pass and all these things are happening. Even though it looks one way right now, that's not how it's going to end up. Then the Bible says, and 10 horns that represented a 10-nation alliance from Europe, out of which the Antichrist will appear. These are the powers that will merge together to form the one world government of the Antichrist. This same beast representing the world government is shown again in Revelation 17:3 and is described as a red beast. Red's used in the scriptures in our world today as the color of communism or socialism. And the world government of the Antichrist will be a socialistic government. But notice, back in Daniel 7, there was the lion had eagle's wings, Great Britain, and the eagle's wings were plucked out of that, the United States. But if you notice that these 4 beasts in Daniel 7, they federalized into one big world governing beast in Revelation 13. Notice that the United States, the eagle's wings, are not included in that socialistic government of the Antichrist. However, the eagle does have a critical role to play in the final 3.5 years immediately preceding Armageddon and the second coming of Jesus Christ. And this is where Netanyahu's interview comes into play and this defense treaty. Revelation 12:14 portrays the eagle, the United States, protecting the woman, Israel, and the 12 stars about her head from Satan and the Antichrist. The woman is Israel. The 12 stars symbolize the 12 tribes of Israel. And this prophecy depicts the U.S., again the eagle, protecting Israel against the world government in the end time. So, who is Israel's best friend today? America, of course. So who was the first nation to defy the world government, called the United Nations, and move its embassy to Jerusalem on May 14th, 2018? The United States. So America and Israel, think about this defense pact treaty that Netanyahu and Trump are talking about signing. Where if there was an existential threat, we will stand with Israel no matter what. America, the Bible prophesies, America and Israel will stand alone against the Antichrist. Even Donald Trump and recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital. And the international community sees that as illegal. But Donald Trump did it anyway. Him recognizing the Golan Heights, Israel's sovereignty over that, and moving our embassy there. The international community is against that. Donald Trump did it anyway. Now, and this was a 2,000-year-old prophecy, but America, in the end time, America and Israel will stand alone against the Antichrist and his world government in the times just ahead. No, the United States will not embrace socialism in spite of many who are determined to install socialism in America. I mean, we've got a full-on socialist running for the President of the United States. As a matter of fact, he has won several states in the primaries. And the United States will resist the government of the Antichrist and the red wave of socialism that is presently engulfing the world. So if you follow what's going on in the news, we're walking right down through the prophecies of the Bible, one right after another. And so, honestly, it is highly likely that Donald Trump's peace plan could end up being the peace plan that starts the final 7 years. I mean, the international community somehow is going to have to get on board. The Palestinians will have to get involved, and the Arab nations could be doing that as we speak, getting them on board. We'll just have to see how all that plays out. But you can see with what's going on right now in the Israeli elections, with the United States recognizing the sovereignty, the peace plan, United States standing with Israel against the international community. That's all Bible prophecy, folks. Happening. We're living through this as we go. So what exciting times. We truly are living in the end time right now.
Move Mountains with Irvin Baxter. This book by Irvin's grandson provides 30 days of devotion that will enhance your relationship with God and others. Authentic illustrations from early morning devotions at Endtime will help you find your purpose and eliminate fears. Commit to taking this 30-day journey and experience real life change. Get your book for only $14.99. Call 1-800-363-8463 or go to endtime.com/move.
About our trip, it was a wonderful experience. We totally enjoyed the time spent with other believers, worshiping and experiencing the places where Christ walked. One of our favorites was being on Mount Moriah, where the Holy of Holies are, the Dome of the Spirit. And the teachings that Brother Baxter did was so enlightening. It was so much to take in. It will take us another month or two to really grasp the full extent of the knowledge we received on this trip. Our tour guide in Israel was fantastic. He was very knowledgeable. I think God chose him just for us. Thanks, Jana. Our lives will never be the same. We will try to do this tour again. Mike and Julie L., Cayman Islands.
Join us May 1st through May 16th, 2020, for a trip to the wonderful land of Israel and the Holy Roman Empire reborn.
If your station only carries the first 30 minutes of End of the Age, go to endtime.com and click the watch button to continue today's broadcast. You can also finish up later by clicking the archive button.
So there you have it, everybody. I mean, Israeli elections, it appears from the exit polls from 3 television stations that Netanyahu may have pulled it off this time. And I think he got 37 seats compared to Gantz's 32. And so with all of the different blocks and everything, it looked like he ended up with like 60 seats. And so it looks like he's going to pull it off. From the exit polls, it looks like he's too far ahead of Gantz for Gantz to catch up. So Netanyahu's already went on there and said, thank you, everybody, for electing me. And so it appears that he's probably won the thing. And so, but everything that goes around the Israeli elections and what's going to happen. Now, another thing that we'll have to watch is what will Netanyahu do now? He's made all these big promises in leading up to the election. Now, what's he going to do about it? Is he going to go ahead after the mapping phase and recognize and have the United States recognize the sovereignty over these big parcels of land and different things? We'll have to see how it all plays out, because you know how politicians are. Netanyahu is still a politician, and he's good at promising things, and then we'll have to see how he follows through. But he's got to get a government formed first. And so you guys have been through it twice in the last 2 years. You kind of know what I'm saying here. But that's Israeli elections, and we'll be following it. We're living through it right now. We'll be following it as we go along. Irvin Baxter will be on tomorrow explaining it in great detail. But I wanted to get to the United States elections now. Tomorrow, the primaries, tomorrow is Super Tuesday. 14 states will be voting tomorrow in the primaries. Texas, California, a lot of the big states, and that's why it's called Super Tuesday, right? So I wanted to touch on some of the things that are happening from a prophetic viewpoint in tomorrow's elections, because the Democrats and Donald Trump could not be more opposed to each other. I mean, think about it like this. Let me go through a few things here. Biden said to the AIPAC policy conference, and he said, I believe it's critical for America's security. That's why I'm proud to say the Obama administration is in their unprecedented support for security. You say, well, what are you talking about, Dave? Well, think of it like this, and I want to go through something really quick. I had to say that, I want to preface something. The Tablet magazine, on December 27th, 2016, the Tablet magazine has confirmed that this is, I'm reading from an excerpt from an article. They said the Tablet magazine has confirmed that one tangible consequence of the high-level U.S. campaign was a phone call. Now, so I may have jumped ahead of myself here. We're talking about Resolution 2334. Which said that in light of Israel's elections and everything that's going on with the peace plan, Resolution 2334 said that Israel, their right to East Jerusalem and the West Bank is illegal according to the international community. So, but look, Donald Trump has said, hey, we're recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital. We're going to recognize the sovereignty under the peace plan of Israel's right to, huge swaths of land out in the West Bank in the face of the international community. Well, to show how they're so diametrically opposed to each other, there was an article that said that Joe Biden and Barack Obama was influential in getting everybody to vote yes when Resolution 2334 was passed. So this magazine was, the Tablet magazine, back on December 27th, 2016, stated that they confirmed that one tangible consequence of the high-level U.S. campaign was a phone call from Vice President Joe Biden to the Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko, which succeeded in changing Ukraine's vote from an expected abstention to a yes. And according to one U.S. national security source, the Obama administration needed a 14-0 vote to justify what the source called the optics of its own abstention. You understand that the Obama administration, just before he left office, Trump had already been elected, and they allowed it to pass, I think it was like December 23rd, 2016, before Trump was inaugurated. He'd have been elected, but he wasn't inaugurated yet. Right in December of that year, they allowed this to pass. It was kind of like Obama's parting shot to Netanyahu. They really didn't get along, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu. Well, the article said that they had proof that Biden had called the Ukrainian president and got him to vote yes. They were going to abstain. He said, no, we want you to vote yes, and they did. So the question was, did Biden put pressure on the Ukrainians? And an individual who was a highly placed figure in the Israeli government, he said categorically, yes, they did. In other words, Israel recognized and blamed Netanyahu for allowing this, or blamed Biden for getting in touch with the Ukrainian president to get them to vote yes on this. And they said that this government official had strong connections, the Israeli official had strong connections to the Ukrainian government sources. And they confirmed to the tablet, this magazine, that the Americans had put direct pressure on both the Ukrainian delegation and on Poroshenko personally in Kiev. That Biden told them to do it is 1,000% true, the source affirmed. Now, you don't think that Israel understands what's going on in the United States elections, and that the Obama and Biden administration allowed this Resolution 2334 to pass December 23rd, 2016. Israel's watching what's happening with the United States election, and this is what I wanted you to know in tomorrow's primaries and what's coming up here in November, the presidential election. So the UN Security Council Resolution 2334 that the Obama administration allowed to pass, we could have vetoed it. Our one UN Security Council vote could have vetoed that, but what it does, the first thing I want you to know is that it reaffirms, Resolution 2334 reaffirms that the establishment by Israel of settlements in the Palestinian territory occupied since 1967, including East Jerusalem, has no legal validity and constitutes a flagrant violation under international law and a major obstacle to the achievement of the two-state solution and a just, lasting, and comprehensive peace. So item number one of this UN Security Council Resolution 2334, passed back in December of 2016, clearly states that Israel's presence in East Jerusalem is illegal and is a flagrant violation of international law. You understand, the Obama administration allowed that to pass, and Israel believes that they have proof, high-up officials in the Israeli government believe they have proof that Joe Biden made the call to the Ukrainian president to get them to vote yes on it. And you think that they're not thinking, there's a chance of this guy getting reelected. And yet Donald Trump, on the other hand, we could have vetoed it, but Donald Trump, on the other hand, said, look, I don't care about all that. I don't care about Resolution 2334. We're going to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital, and we're going to recognize very soon their right to large swaths of land under the peace plan for Israel. And they recognize the Golan Heights, that we moved our embassy there. It's very prophetic what's happening here, folks. The Bible says that the United States and Israel will stand in the face of the international community and the Antichrist's world government in the future, just prior to the second coming of Jesus Christ. We're living through this prophecy. It's the ongoing fulfillment of it. The Obama and Biden administration allowed that to happen. We abstained and allowed that resolution to pass, saying that East Jerusalem, which we call it Jerusalem, but they call it East Jerusalem and this, that, and the other, but they allowed that to be called illegal under international law. And so Biden is one of the leading candidates for the president here in, Democratic candidate for president here in November. But prophecy says we will stand against the international community all the way with Israel, all the way up through the end. Now that's Biden, okay? He's one of the leading candidates. The other candidate is Bernie Sanders. And let me tell you what happened with Danny Danon over the weekend. At a debate in Charleston, South Carolina, just days ahead of that state's Democratic primary, this is a few days ago, Bernie Sanders said, I'm very proud of being Jewish. He said, I actually lived in Israel for some months. But he said, what I happen to believe is that right now, sadly, tragically, in Israel, through Benjamin Netanyahu, Bernie Sanders said you have a reactionary racist who is now running the country. And I'm thinking, you got to be kidding me. If you were elected president of the United States, do you think Netanyahu's going to be very friendly with you? But in response to Israel, in response to what Bernie Sanders said, Israel's ambassador to the United Nations, Danny Danon, told the Washington gathering at the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, AIPAC, yesterday, that, and he said this about Bernie Sanders in response to him calling Netanyahu a racist. He said, we don't want Sanders at AIPAC. We don't want him in Israel. Anyone who calls our prime minister a racist is either a liar or an ignorant fool or both. Danny Danon said that, and I'm quoting. So imagine in the near future a Biden or a President Biden or a President Sanders getting elected and going to Netanyahu and saying, hey, we want great relations with you. Let's leave the past in the past. Even though Biden was influential in getting Resolution 2334 passed, saying that your right to East Jerusalem is illegal and the West Bank illegal, or Bernie Sanders saying you were a racist, but Netanyahu, somehow we want to get along. I mean, you understand the dynamics of what's going on in this election and how it falls in line with Bible prophecy, because the United States says, or the Bible says, that the United States is going to be standing with Israel, protecting her all the way through the end time. So you're saying, are you foretelling who's going to be president? No, I'm not. There's no way I could tell that. But at the end of the day, I'm just saying, in light of Bible prophecy and what's coming, you need to understand what these candidates, they sound good and they might look good standing up on a stage in a debate and all this other stuff. But at the end of the day, you really need to know what's going on before you vote. Your vote's very, very, very important. And tomorrow is the primaries, is the Super Tuesday. I know here in Texas we'll be voting. I voted early last week, but the fact of the matter is, I really wanted you to know what's coming up tomorrow. And if you haven't voted already in your state, make sure you understand where your candidate's at on Israel and some of the more important salient issues here in the United States. Because we're talking about abortion. Where do they stand on the southern border wall? I mean, all kinds of things. Understand where your candidate stands. Just don't go in there and start pushing buttons. Because what kind of country do you want to live in? And that's why I'm saying we're living in the end time right now. We can't just vote anybody we want to and hope things work out. We've got to be educated. We've got to go vote. And then we've got to pray for these individuals that God keeps his hand on them.
Does the book of Revelation frighten you? Do its symbols confuse you? For centuries, the book of Revelation has been misunderstood and misinterpreted. In Revelation, the unveiling of Jesus Christ, Volume 1, Irvin Baxter unlocks the mystery of the book of Revelation with in-depth analysis and commentary like you've never heard before. This 10-part definitive DVD series and 268-page comprehensive commentary book covers the first 12 chapters of the book of Revelation, featuring on-location photography, classic artwork, and symbolic illustrations. You'll walk away with complete understanding and peace about the events happening during the final years on Earth. These comprehensive study tools, available for $299, will deepen your biblical understanding as you dig into the original intent of the book, answering the mysterious prophecies and symbols of the book of Revelation. Don't miss this special offer. Call now, 1-800-ENDTIME, or go to endtime.com to order. Call or go online now to get this comprehensive Bible study.
So, another thing I wanted to cover, I know Super Tuesday's coming up tomorrow, very important, the primaries, who are we going to get to run for the president of the United States, Republican and Democrat. But now that leads me to how this affects November 3rd. And so it's very, very important. This, everybody, since we're so far off into the end time, we can't make a mistake who we have for president of the United States. We don't have just, decades and decades and decades of time. We only have so much time left. So we better make sure that we get things right And what kind of country do we want to live in? I don't want to live in one that's moving away from God. I want to live in one that, by and large, is moving towards God. So that's never going to happen. I don't believe that. There were entire cities that turned to God in the Bible. Why couldn't that happen again? And so, very critical. What kind of country do you want to live in? You don't just go in there and start pushing buttons. Make sure you understand who you're voting for, and then go vote. Understand the issues. What do they believe? How do they line up as close as possible? You say, are there any saints running for the president? Not that I know of. But I'm not electing my pastor. I'm electing a president. And so it's very important that I elect one that will at least get me as close as I want to be, as this country anyway. Regardless of who's the president, I'm going to live for God. That's the way I look at it. And if I've got one that's pro-abortion and one that's anti-abortion, who do you think I'm going to vote for? The decision's easy at that point. I'm anti-abortion, so I'm going to go with this guy. Does he have flaws? Has he done things wrong in his life? Sure. But I'm definitely not going to vote for the guy who's pro-abortion. I mean, it really becomes pretty simple to me. I don't even have to pray about that. Somebody who in the past has been anti-Israel and somebody who's pro-Israel, that's pretty easy, folks. And so when you look at it biblically, I get the one that's going to line up to as close to my values as possible. Is he going to hit every one on the button? Probably not. But some of them are pretty glaring. And so, very, very important. You say, well, Dave, you're causing me to maybe want to break from my party lines that I've had since I was born. Maybe you need to. I mean, because we don't have that many years left. Okay, so let me get off into what I want to say here because I get off on these trails and then it's hard to get back. But the fact of the matter is that the presidential election is coming up. Like I said, it's probably the most important election we've ever had here in the United States. And the Democrats and Donald Trump, they couldn't be more diametrically opposed to each other. But from a prophetic viewpoint, just look at the international stage, okay? Because, again, you've got the situation here in the United States, and then you've got the international community, the world government that's being established, and you've got to understand prophecy. The United States standing with Israel, the United States standing against the world government in the end time. All of this stuff plays into how I vote. And so the fact of the matter is, Donald Trump, has he done everything perfect? No. But he has done a lot of wonderful things that I'm thankful for. Number one, Donald Trump pulled the U.S. out of the Paris Climate Accord. The Paris Climate Accord is part of world government. You understand? The Sustainable Development Goals are the socialistic blueprint of world government for the United Nations. That's what it's about. And they were signed in September of 2015. The Obama administration signed the United States onto them. And the commitment by nations around the world, financial commitments, and commitments to adhere to the ecological part of that, that's the Paris Climate Accord, the climate part of the Sustainable Development Goals. Donald Trump pulled us out of that. He said, no, that's a hoax. We're going to pull out of that. I'm very thankful that he did that. If you understand that the propaganda coming out from the United Nations is the propaganda of global warming, human-induced global warming, which leads to climate change and all this other stuff, it is an absolute hoax. It's propaganda. Donald Trump recognized that, pulled us out of the climate accord. Well, on the other hand, all of the remaining Democratic, you know that Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar, they're now out of the race. So that leaves us with who? Bloomberg, Sanders, Biden, and Warren. All of the remaining Democratic presidential candidates would rejoin the U.S. to the Paris Climate Accord day one. So you see that they're diametrically opposed to each other. Donald Trump pulled the U.S. out of the Iran nuclear deal, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, all of the remaining Democratic presidential candidates would rejoin the United States to the Iran nuclear deal signed by the Obama administration. And, I mean, so just on those two right there, I'm sitting there scratching my head going, what's the decision? You know, against the wishes of the international community, Trump is building a wall to protect our southern border. You understand that the world government does not want any nation protecting their borders. They want borders to go away and the whole world to become one big global nation that answers to a world government. That's in the mind of a globalist. That is utopia. I mean, look at what's happened in Europe, the model for world government. They tore down all their borders, took away all the visas, and you can drive from one nation into another one. No tariffs, no anything. That's what they want to happen to the United States, Canada, Mexico, no borders. Donald Trump comes along and says, I'm going to build a wall. Well, most of the Democrats that are left would stop the wall. They would not fund any more of the wall. Now, I think maybe, Klobuchar's gone. So I think the remaining ones left are absolutely diametrically opposed to the wall. So after this next election, we move, the question is, will we move further away from world government or yield up our sovereignty and allow the world government to control the United States even more? I mean, if you understand what was really the gorilla in the 800-pound gorilla sitting in the middle of the living room back in the 2016 election between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, it was nationalism versus globalism. Hillary Clinton, much of her platform was moving us further into than Obama did, further into the international community. Donald Trump was moving us out. During his presidential campaign, he started talking about globalization is bad. He started talking about the establishment. And then when he gets elected, he starts talking about the swamp. And he starts, during his campaign, I'm going to build a wall. The international community was going nuts. And yet Hillary Clinton was pro all that stuff. She was against the wall. She was pro the Paris Climate Agreement. She was pro all that stuff. So she was going to move us into that, Donald Trump pulling us out. So if you know anything about Bible prophecy, we need to continue to take a stand against world government. Very, very important. Moving on. So now you see where I'm at. So I had a question here, and this is very important. I want you to hear this. Somebody gave me a question. They sent in and said, hey, in your world, we have a video, a DVD, Endtime does, in your world government, forming now, DVD, you explain the influence and actions of the International Criminal Court, and I'm kind of surprised that they haven't taken action against President Trump for something since he has been a huge obstacle in one world government. Why haven't they done that? Well, I wanted to read you something. This is a statement that Donald Trump made. Because a lot of you have asked about the International Criminal Court. Why haven't they come against the United States for everything that Donald Trump has done? Well, Donald Trump issued a statement back in September 2018 on protecting American constitutionalism and sovereignty from the International Criminal Court. And Donald Trump said this. He said the International Criminal Court is an international court. It's a wing of the world government and the United Nations. It was developed to help be the court system of the world government. And it was established in July 2002. And upon the entry into force of the multilateral treaty known as the Rome Statute. Well, though the United States originally signed that Rome Statute in 2000, the Senate failed to ratify it. So in May of 2002, George W. Bush authorized Undersecretary of State John Bolton at that time to unsign this agreement based on the United States' view that it was fundamentally illegitimate. So the United States' view was grounded in concerns over the broad, unaccountable powers granted to the International Criminal Court and its chief prosecutor by the Rome Statute. powers that pose a significant threat to the United States sovereignty and our constitutional protections. The United States is not a party to the Rome Statute and has consistently voiced its strong objections to any assertion of ICC jurisdiction over American personnel. So the United States is not an outlier, and more than 70 nations representing 2/3 of the world's population, or over 70% of the world's armed forces, are not parties to this. So some of our closest allies, including Israel, have not pointed out the ICC's flawed approach of constraining liberal democratic nations in exercising their right of self-defense. You say, well, what in the world? The International Criminal Court that's what it is, international. And it has been established, even though many nations have not signed on to it, it was established to be the court system of the world government. And it's a fundamental principle of international law that a treaty is binding only on its parties, and that it does not create obligations for non-parties without their consent. Now, imagine, so the Rome Statute cannot dispose of its rights of the U.S., of rights of the U.S. as a non-party without U.S. states' consent. So the fact of the matter is, when you hear in the news about the International Criminal Court in Israel or the United States, do you think the United States would not step in with Israel if they were to be, because I know the International Criminal Court, you've heard about it in the news lately, about going against Israel about war crimes. The fact of the matter is that in the end time, this is very important why you understand Bible prophecy, because in the end time, the United Nations, the seat of world government in the earth, and their arms, the World Health Organization, International Criminal Court, the World Trade Organization, those are all entities designed to govern the planet. So in the future, the United States, the Bible says, Revelation 12:14, the wings of an eagle will protect the woman. The wings of an eagle, United States. The woman, Israel. We will stand with and protect Israel against the world government in the end time. Donald Trump made a statement, and he was making this statement, and he said, we absolutely are going to protect the interest of the American people against the international community. We're not going to allow them to control us. But there are people here in the United States that would want to yield up our sovereignty to that. And that's why I'm saying, when you vote, make sure you know the issues. I mean, drill down. Go read what they've said, statements they've made. Drill down and know what they're talking about before you go choose a candidate in a primary, or more importantly, in the presidential election coming up here in November. A lot of things happening, and we are way off into the end time, everybody. So God bless you. Thanks for joining me today.
This has been End of the Age, brought to you by the faithful partners of Endtime Ministries. If you're not currently a partner with Endtime Ministries, or if you would like more information, we invite you to call us at 1-800-ENDTIME. That's 1-800-363-8463, or visit us online at endtime.com.
Thank you for watching. If you liked this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel and like our Facebook page.